What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Will Justin Martinez go down as the best closer in Dbacks franchise history? And looking at the latest pitching projections according to ZIPS and standing projections according to Pecota. Pecota? Pecota.
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist, and I'm a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. On today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, we were discussing if Justin Martinez has a chance to be the best closer in D-backs franchise history, and then discussing projections. ZIPS has their projections for how they think the D-backs are going to look next year. We'll take a look at that, as well as the Pecota projections for next year's standing. So a whole bunch I want to talk to you guys about today. Thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. Now let's get into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. I know I don't got my fancy graphic behind me right now. I still have yet to set up the green screen in the new apartment. So once I get that up, we'll be back to our regularly scheduled cool backgrounds behind us on these YouTube podcasts for you guys watching the video stream. But let's discuss something that I think was kind of fun when just looking at like the D-backs franchise leaders for career saves. You notice a little trend. D-backs don't really have a rich history of closers. I know since I've taken over this podcast in 2020, the biggest issue I think that we've talked about the most on this podcast is D-backs need a closer. D-backs need someone that could shut down, opposing teams late in games, right? Who's our ninth inning guy? We just haven't had it since I've taken over this podcast. We've tried Mark Melanson and, Paul Sewald and Castro and Scott McGuff and Stephon Crichton and Hector Rondon and Junior Guerrera and Tyler Clippard and Joaquin Soria, like all these guys who are absolutely terrible and not good at all. And when you look at the D-backs franchise as a whole, there's not too much talent when you look at the guys who have come in and saved games for the D-backs. There's only 13 players ever who have recorded a 20 save season with the D-backs, or should I say there's only 20 save seasons or 13 20 save seasons ever, not just 13 players who have done it. There's only 13 single seasons where a D-back closer has saved at least 20 games for the team. The career high for a single season is Jose Valverde in 2007, and Valverde is also the D-backs all-time leader in saves. If you guys want to guess how many, it's not as high as a number as you would think. For a guy who's led the league in saves 3 times, over 40 times each time, he only has 98 career saves with the D-backs, because that final year with Arizona, he led the league in saves, had 47, and then was traded away and went on to have a really good career with the Astros, with the Tigers, and the D-backs only got one fantastic season out of him as their closer, and he's still their all-time leading closer in terms of saves with 98. JJ Putz is number 2 on the list with 83 saves. And you'll notice a trend with all these guys. All of them didn't have that many seasons with the D-backs. Like Putz got that mark essentially over the course of 2 seasons. All these guys are not even known to be like Arizona Diamondbacks pitchers, right? Like Putz, Valverde, Brad Ziegler, like all these guys had stops with the D-backs. All these guys have had, stretches with the D-backs, but all of them also spent time with other teams, other franchises, had moments in other places. So when you think of their Hall of Fame bust, you're not exactly putting Dbacks as the first team or putting them in a Dbacks cap. And so it's like when you look at the Dbacks closers in their franchise history, one, there's not that many single season dominant years by these D-back closers. Valverde has one, Fernando Rodney has one, but all those guys quite literally just have one. And then the second thing is anybody who did have a great season with the D-backs, it wasn't for very long. There's no sustained excellence from like any D-backs closer or reliever in their franchise history. That leads me to my question. Can Justin Martinez be the best closer in D-backs franchise history? Because I think it's undoubtedly a yes. I think he's clearly on track to be. The D-backs do the right thing. You just keep him through all his arbitration, rookie year stuff. Maybe you bring him back and re-sign him when time's for free agency, as long as he doesn't break the bank, right? Because you still never want to overpay for a closer. But at the very least, Justin Martinez, from what we've seen with his talent so far, there's no reason why he shouldn't be one of the D-backs all-time leading closers, if not the all-time leading closer, because if Valverde was able to do it with 98 career saves, Justin Martinez is only 22 years of age, and he's not even arbitration eligible till 2027. He's not even eligible to be a free agent till 2030. So if you have 5 more seasons of Martinez being a full-time closer where he's averaging between 20 to 35 saves a season for the D-backs over the next few years, he's going to smash the all-time saves mark that Valverde set, that Putz set as the number 2 guy. Plus, Martinez is just straight up better than any of those guys. Putz and Valverde, they had very good single seasons with sub-3 ERAs, but Martinez already did that this past year, and he hasn't even racked up the save total yet. Right now, he just showed you he can be a closer. He showed you how dominant his stuff was, but we still haven't even anointed him the title of full-time closer yet. If we do that over the course of the next few seasons, and he continues to put up numbers similar to what he did last year, where he had a 2.48 ERA, double-digit strikeouts per 9, can throw 100 miles per hour on his fastball, his split finger, right? This guy has nasty stuff. And so if Martinez can just continue to do what he needs to do and the D-backs give him that runway to be the full-time closer, there is no reason Justin Martinez won't go down as the best D-backs closer in franchise history unless he gets hurt or unless the D-backs see a closer out there on the open market for cheap. They can just go out there and acquire via trade, via free agency, who is just clearly better than Justin Martinez. If you could go out there and get, Ryan Hesley for nothing, then yes, sure, I guess Justin Martinez won't be on track to be the D-backs greatest closer. But when looking at his age, when looking at his talent, and looking at the competition he has to go against in D-backs franchise history, there's no doubt in my mind Justin Martinez will be the D-backs all-time leading saves leader and be the best closer in D-backs franchise history. Now we'll discuss those ZIP pitching projections in segment number 2. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. FanDuel is the app that is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. My favorite thing to do on FanDuel is the same game parlay. Whenever the Suns are playing, give me KD over on 25 points, give me Booker over on 25, and give me the Suns money line. When it hits, which is not very often, it brings a big smile to my face. And if you want a big smile on your face, just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right. Back here on the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. And now As we get closer to the 2025 regular season, we know we're going to be seeing a whole lot of projections start to come out. And recently, ZIPS has, well, I still haven't seen the article. I'm mostly going off a tweet that showed you the projected ERA for all pitching staffs entering next season and the projected ERA plus for each pitching staff. And there was something very interesting when looking at the graphic, because when you take a peep, if you want to see the graphic, go to Dan Zimborski on Twitter. He does the ZIP projections for Fangraphs. He has a graphic up there that tells you the 2025 projected ERA plus and ERA for all pitching staffs in 2025. And at the very top, number one on the list in both projected ERA and projected ERA plus, the Arizona Diamondbacks are projected to have the best pitching staff in baseball next season. Now, when I saw this, was I a little floored? A little bit, because it's not just the rotation, it's the whole pitching staff. If you just kept it to the rotation, I might have had maybe a little bit more belief. But like we said, we know this D-backs bullpen has been their biggest issue the last few years. We do feel like we're starting to trend in the right direction. We like Martinez, we like Puck, Thompson, Ginkel, Mansply. Like, we finally have a few guys that we really trust. But we are at the point where we say our rotation is so elite that it's okay for a bullpen to just like middle of the pack. That's good enough to have the best pitching staff in baseball. I think I would even push back a little bit on these ZIP projections that the D-backs have the best pitching staff. Now, I do think the best case scenario for the D-backs, if every pitcher on their staff has the best scenario outcome for this situation next year, I definitely think the D-backs can at least be the number 2 pitching staff next year, because when you look at, you get the best version of Burns, Gallen, and Kelly. That's 3 Cy Young candidates, with Burns and Gallen potentially can win it. I think Merrill Kelly's right there as a fringe top 10 candidate. I know he hasn't gotten it, but go look at his numbers from like a couple years ago. That's a Cy Young candidate right there. Fott, or let's go Erod and Monty. We know both of those guys can look like number 2, number 3 starters, if not better, for a rotation if it's their best case scenario. Brandon Fott, best case scenario for him, maybe he finally looks like a number 2 or number 3 starter. Ryan Nelson continues to improve and do what he did last year. So talking about 6 or 7 man rotation, like, yeah, best case scenario for the D-backs in their rotation, yeah, you're going to have 5 or 6 potential all-star starting pitchers. So I could see why, if you're just looking at rotations, I wouldn't be surprised if Zip says the D-backs have the best rotation. But if you're adding in the bullpen to the pitching staff, that's where I get a little bit more concerned, because I could definitely see Martinez, Puck, Ginkel, Thompson, Mansupply being a great 5. But after that is where it gets a little bit more hairy. For the D-backs, they still need to add another reliever or 2 to the back end of their bullpen for next season. There are definitely guys I like that we could throw in who we saw last year, like Gilbert Diaz, Bryce Jarvis, maybe a Blake Walston, like, who knows. But to say that the D-backs currently, their pitching staff is projected to be the best for next season, I don't know how I feel about that. I don't think I agree with that, but that at least tells you how the D-backs pitching is viewed by other people. That tells you what the formulas and the arithmetics are saying, that the D-backs have actually really done a good job of development, have done a really good job of picking out and finding and scouting these gems, the Ryan Thompsons off the waiver wire, who were just released by Tampa Bay, picked up at the end of that 2023 season and was so dominant for the D-backs through the end of the regular season, through the postseason, a real revelation for Arizona last year. And I guess if you look at the best case scenario for the D-backs bullpen, I mean, like we were just discussing, Martinez, full-time closer, like that could be a 30 to 40 save guy with a nasty, dominant ERA and strikeout numbers. Like that could be prime Craig Kimbrell, Aroldis Chapman 2.0, right? AJ Puck is already pitching in those molds. He's just not a closer. But we know when he came to Arizona last year, up until that final day of the regular season, he was absolutely shut down. We know Kevin Ginkel has the stuff to be. We've seen the best version of Ryan Thompson. We've seen Joe Mansupply make the All-Star team. So we know what the best version of him can look like as well. So if you're telling me the best version of the D-backs pitching staff is at least top 3, I could believe that. But there's still the LA Dodgers out there. And when looking at Snell, Yamamoto, Glasnow, Ohtani, Roki Sasaki, I mean, that's 5 undoubted number 1 starters entering next season. Like the D-backs might have like 3 of those and then like 3 guys who would be like number 2 starters. Dodgers have 5 or 6 guys who'd be number 1s in other rotations. Plus, they still have guys like Tony Gonsolin and Landon Knack and stuff like that coming off their bench as well. They added Tanner Scott, Kirby Yates. They still got Blake Trinian. Like, they have the nastiest pitching staff. I love ZIPS. I love the projections. I love Dan Szymborski coming through for the D-backs. I definitely think the D-backs have a case to be the second best pitching staff in the MLB next season, but the best, I would still give it to the LA Dodgers, who, funny enough, are not number 2 on this list. The Dodgers are number 4 in terms of projected ERA plus. The Braves are number 2. The Red Sox are number 3, and then the Dodgers are 4. I think we all feel like the Dodgers should probably be number 1 in projected ERA plus. I mean, their rotation and bullpen alone is probably worth $1.5 billion, right? Especially if you count up that deferred money. I love what the Red Sox have done this offseason, but you can't tell me, a rotation of Patrick Sandoval and Lucas Giolito and guys like that nature are better than what the Dodgers are throwing out there. I like the Braves rotation, but Chris Sale is still old. He's coming off the one great year after a few prior seasons of being really hurt. Strider coming off the Tommy John as well. Like, there's some question marks. Like, I think there's just way too many question marks with the Braves and Red Sox as opposed to the Dodgers, where I wouldn't put those teams ahead of LA, especially after the offseason they just had. When looking at that team on paper, looking at all the talent, I think the Dodgers have to be higher. Then real quick, I'm going to say Cleveland Guardians at number 6, way too high. When you're getting rid of good players to bring in guys like Paul Sewald to be your closer, I think you've missed the mark as an organization with Cleveland. So they're going to be one of my sneaky unders probably for next season. But currently, ZIPS projections, love the D-backs. I love ZIPS, but number 1 projected pitching staff for next season, as much as I would love for that to happen, I think I would settle for number 2 because I probably feel like the Dodgers are going to be number 1. Now, how about the projected standings according to Pecota? Where do they have the D-backs? We'll discuss in segment number 3. And if you're looking to buy tickets to an upcoming sport or an event, then the best place to do that, of course, is going to be Game Times, because Game Time is the best place for last minute deals on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have this feature called all-in pricing. When you toggle this feature on, it shows you your total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You could get a panoramic view from your seat before you buy. They also have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right. Back here on the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. And let's discuss some of these Pecota projections for next season. These are the standings. Where do they believe the D-backs are going to land? I mean, if ZIPS is saying we're going to have the best pitching staff in baseball next season, I'm telling you the D-backs have their closer of the future, the present, the past, the best that ever was in Justin Martinez. He's going to be there. Where would the D-backs as a team with all that talent, where are they projected according to Pecota? Because I will say, I like Pecota a lot more than the odds on FanDuel, because like I've discussed on a podcast yesterday and last week, I don't know if it's FanDuel, I don't know if it's the general public, but the D-backs get disrespected on that app because they are projected like 85.5 wins or something like that. It's like 85.5, I think. Projected finish 3rd in the NOS, projected finish like 14th in odds in terms of the World Series, like crazy stuff. But then you come to our nice friends at Pecota, and where do they have the D-backs? Projected number 2 in the NOS at 87.1 wins, which I'm not mad at all, because when you look at it compared to the rest of the NL, Dodgers have the projected most wins at 103.6. Not a surprise. Braves, number 2, 91.9. The Cubs, a little surprising, number 3, 90.5. Then you got the Mets at 4, I guess you would say, right? And then you got the Phillies at 5, and then you got the Dbacks at 6. Mets projected 89, Phillies 87.6, and then Dbacks are the 6th highest projected team at 87.1. So we're projected to be the final wildcard team, right there with the same amount of wins as Philly and probably the New York Mets. Does Pecota think we have a chance of winning the NOS? No, I think no one thinks that because of the LA Dodgers and the talent that they have. But I really respect Pecota because I think these are the most accurate projections I've seen so far. I think 87 wins is fine for the D-backs because I think the National League is going to be so tough next season. I think you should really have these win totals lower. So I'm fine with 103 for the Dodgers because they're so talented and so deep. But for the Braves, I mean, if everyone bounces back, 91.9 is definitely possible for them. Their lineup had an all-time down season last year. Acuna is coming back. So I expect them to probably be around 90, if not like up to 95 wins. But can Chris Sale duplicate what he did? What is Spencer Strider's health looking like? The Spencer Swollen box, are they really ready? Ronaldo Lopez, are they really ready? But I still think Atlanta is the best team in that division. I do have some reservations around the New York Mets. I don't think they're that stacked of a team. Yes, they got Juan Soto and they had that great second half last year, but they haven't brought back Pete Alonso. Like, I really like the lineup for the Mets. Like, I like Lindor, Soto, Nimmo, Vientos, Alvarez, like Brett Beatty. Like, I think it's a pretty solid lineup. But right now, Senga's their best starter. And then the rest of their rotations, like who? Frankie Montes? David Peterson? Paul Blackburn? Like, their rotations are kind of bad. And so unless the Mets really address their pitching, I still don't really believe in that team that much. And so I actually do like the D-backs more than the New York Mets, but the Mets are probably a playoff team for next year. The Phillies, I don't know why they fall down to 87.6 wins. I feel like they're not any different than the last couple years, unless you just think age and wear and tear and just natural regression. But I still think the Phillies are going to be fighting for the NL East title. Like, I would say Dodgers, tier 1, Braves, and Phillies are going to be fighting for the NL East. I think they're in tier 2. I think the D-backs and I think the New York Mets are kind of like in their own tier with the Chicago Cubs kind of sniffing. And I would even put the San Diego Padres in our tier, to be honest. Padres are projected at 82.2 wins. I still like the Padres team. I still think they have enough talent until they actually trade the Ceases and Michael Kings. Like, as long as they keep the current roster that they have entering next season, still think they're going to be one of the better teams in the National League. The biggest question to me right now, looking at the standings, is how good really is the Chicago Cubs? Because I think the Cubs were going to be like one of my sneaky dark horse teams, but if you're projecting them at 90.5 wins, then that's not sneaky or dark horse at all. They do have a pretty solid rotation. They have a pretty strong lineup as well. Like, it's a pretty well-balanced team. I think it's a high floor, low ceiling team. They'll probably win in the mid 80s, be a potential wild card team. They could definitely take that division. But again, the Milwaukee Brewers are just a team that never goes away, that never dies. Maybe this is finally the season. But I think the National League is going to be tough next year. I don't think there will be I think the only 90-plus win team realistically will be the LA Dodgers. I think everyone else will cannibalize themselves because I think some of the teams who are not even projected to make the playoffs of the National League will be very good next year. I still think the Washington Nationals are a team to watch out for over the next couple years. Same with the Cincinnati Reds. I think the Giants are a team that's going to be super frisky and will have a shot at a wild card next year. I actually do kind of like the Giants this year way more than entering past years. I'm kind of out on Pittsburgh, but they still have a really strong rotation that you can't mess with. Like, basically, all the NL teams outside of Miami and Colorado, like, you can at least make an argument of friskiness and watch out that maybe they could do something and make some noise, maybe make a run at the wild card, at least or at least play playoff spoiler and knock some teams out at the end of the regular season. And so looking at the Pecota projections, Dbacks 6th highest projected win total to be the last final wildcard spot. I think that's fine. I think going to next season, I don't think we're going to see a lot of high win totals because I think the National League is going to be so good, such a tough competition that we're going to see a lot of these teams beat up against each other. Like how Pecota has way higher projected win total than FanDuel because I think Dbacks are way too low on that app. We still love our friends at FanDuel. Just want to see them get a little bit more juice. So a team that has projected the best pitching staff in baseball next season, I think 87 wins and a wild card spot is perfectly justifiable for the 2025 Arizona Diamondbacks team. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.